It began with silence. Not the quiet type, but the dense kind, the kind that presses down on your chest and won't budge. It was the sort of silence that tenses you up for something to occur. The courtroom was crowded. You could sense the electricity the minute you entered. Polished wooden benches lined rows and rows packed to the brim. Newsmen leaned forward in their notebooks, microphones, and flashing cameras. Friends of the family, individuals who had watched their saga unspool over years, whispered softly, holding their breath for what they knew would be a tempest. The whole room was watching one man. He was seated at the defense table, his shoulders stiff and strained, as if a man who'd erected a wall around himself. His face was pinched, jaw locked, hands laid out on the table, as if clutching control by a lifeline. But behind the eyes, something else lurked, something quieter and chillier. It wasn't fear, it wasn't guilt, it was the gaze of a man who knew that whatever was about to occur, nothing would ever be the same again. He stared directly ahead at the judge's vacant bench, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Not the press, not the spectators, not the women whose lives he had forever altered. On the other side of the room, Robyn Brown held a tightly rolled up, crumpled tissue in her shaking fingers. The one the world had known to smile on television. Always calm, always kind, she was gone. This Robyn was worn out. Her eyes were puffy with tears. Her shoulders slumped, burdened by more than the weight of a trial. She wasn't only up against her husband, she was up against the man who had once vowed forever. The gallery whispering swelled. People looked at one another. Others shook their heads. Others leaned forward, anticipating. Everyone could feel it. The air was thick, as if the walls of the courtroom held their breath. And then, the noise that broke the tension. Bang! The gavel struck the desk in a sharp, loud echo. This court is now in session. Brown versus Brown. The whispers ceased immediately. The room paralyzed. In the rear of the courtroom sat three familiar faces in a row. Christine, Janelle, and Mary. Three women who had shared the same dream. Three women who had endured years of brokenness. Now they were not wives. They were witnesses. Witnesses to a tale they had lived. Christine sat with her tightly clenched hands in her lap. Her eyes were piercing, fixed on Kody. She had readied herself for this day, but nothing could possibly prepare her for seeing him like this. A stranger, cold, distant. Janelle slouched a little forward, her expression calm but unreadable. She'd always been tough, always attempted to keep the peace. But at that moment, even she couldn't conceal the fissure in her heart. And Mary sat quietly. She wasn't gazing at Kody or Robyn. She was looking down at her hands, her thumb gliding over the silver ring that remained on her finger. Not because of love, but through habit. It was the final reminder of a history that no longer was. This was not an ordinary courtroom trial. This was not property or custody or money. This was betrayal, secrets. A family the world had watched for years, now being ripped apart under oath. The judge, with silver hair and piercing eyes, scanned the room with a sense of power. She had heard many cases. She had seen men and women lie, break, confess, and beg. But this was different. This wasn't a couple. This was a family business coming apart before her very eyes. The parties will be seated, she said, dryly. We will proceed shortly. The creaking of wooden chairs across the floor resounded, as they all sat down. Even the slightest noise seemed amplified. Amidst that silence, Robyn's lawyer, a middle-aged woman in a black suit, leaned in to her client. She said something gentle, perhaps words of encouragement, perhaps a final reminder. Robyn nodded feebly, dabbing at her nose with the tissue she'd been cradling like a shield. Her hands trembled, but her eyes came up, and for one quick moment, she gazed at Kody. That glance was more potent than any words. It was not a loving glance. It was not even a glance of hatred. It was the glance of a hurt woman, from the one person she most trusted. Kody did not reciprocate the glance. He gazed steadily at the judge, shoulders braced, face set in stone. The tension thickened. Christine felt it bearing down on her. Janelle's hands clenched around the bench. Mary shut her eyes. Everyone sensed something was brewing. Something enormous. Something that would shatter the picture-perfect world the world used to believe in. The bailiff advanced. All rise for the Honorable Judge Carter. Everybody in the courtroom stood. The judge walked in, her black robe trailing behind her, each step deliberate and composed. But the composure in the courtroom was brittle, like glass poised to shatter. When the judge sat down, she gazed between Robyn and Kody for a long silent moment. She could see it, the pain residing in their eyes like shadows. This wasn't going to be easy. This was going to be dirty. You may be seated, she said. Everyone remained seated. Robyn held the tissue to her lips. Kody leaned back against his chair, arms folded as if preparing for battle. The judge riffled through the case file. The pages crackled with a sound that filled the room like thunder in the distance. We are here today, the judge repeated slowly, deliberately, for the case of Brown versus Brown. A case of serious accusations and emotional harm within an enduring public marriage. She let the words linger. No one stirred. No one dared to breathe. Kody swallowed hard. Robyn's breathing became shallow. Christine felt her pulse in her ears. This was not about them anymore. This was about all they had created. All the lies, all the secrets, all the nights they lied to cameras with smiles on their faces as their world was breaking in the background. The judge gazed straight at Robyn. Mrs. Brown, are you ready to make your opening statement? Robyn's throat constricted. She blinked, her eyes closed for a moment, taking a deep breath like a soldier about to enter combat. Her lawyer nodded slightly, and then she stood up. The scraping sound of her chair made them all wince. She steadied her shaking hands, clenching them together in a tight fist. She didn't need to glance at anyone to sense the stare of hundreds of eyes upon her. She moved forward one step, then another. Every step was heavier than the last, like she was wading through years of memories. The memories flashed in her head like they were happening. The day she married Kody, the vows they whispered in the dark, the way she took him at his word when he promised her she was the one. The moment everything began to unravel. Robyn made it to the front of the room and slowly swung around to the judge. But she could not help but do so. Her eyes settled on Kody, and for the first time, he glanced over at her. Their gazes met, and in the silent instant, the whole courtroom sensed the history between them. It wasn't a husband-wife look. It was a look between two individuals who had once constructed their world together, and now stood on opposite sides of a war. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Her throat was on fire. Her chest hurt. She wasn't just about to testify. She was about to shatter the silence of years. She started quietly, near to herself. I didn't want this. The judge leaned forward, inviting her to go on. Robyn swallowed hard and straightened, even with her trembling hands. I wanted a marriage. I wanted love. I wanted a life where the man I trusted would not make me a stranger. A couple of people in the gallery gasped softly. The tale had started. Christine dropped her head, one tear tracing its way down her cheek. Janelle's mouth pressed into a thin line. Mary clutched the ring on her finger. Robyn drew a deep breath. But in place of love, I received lies. The whole courtroom leaned forward in unison, without even being aware of it. Everyone in the room wanted to hear what she would say next. I received silence, she whispered, her voice breaking. I received substitute. Her words remained in the air like a specter. And in this instant, it was obvious this was not going to be an ordinary trial. This was going to be the demolition of a family that the world believed they understood. Robyn's voice remained in the air, light but hard enough to cut through the quiet like a knife. I wanted a marriage. A genuine one. A marriage where love wasn't something I had to beg for. Her fingers shook as she clutched the wooden railing of the witness stand. It was the only thing holding her upright against the pressure of everything she'd held within. Over in the other room, Kody shifted in his seat. His jaw clenched. He hadn't been expecting this version of Robyn. Not the woman who had stood up for him. Not the one who had stood by his side, no matter what. But this wasn't the old Robyn. This was the woman he had shattered. And now she was finished being quiet. The judge leaned forward slightly, pen held ready over her notes. gaze on Robyn. Mrs. Brown, the judge said softly. You may proceed. Robyn breathed shakily, holding the tissue over her lips to stop herself from shaking too violently. She could sense the whole room staring at her. The press, the fans, the other wives. But in her head, it was only her and Kody, only the two of them. Like before. Except now, they were on opposite sides of a war zone. She slowly turned her head to him. Kody glanced up. Their eyes locked once more. And something within her broke. You said I was different, she choked. Her voice shattering, but audible enough for the whole courtroom to hear. You said I was the one who made you whole. Do you recall that, Kody? Kody didn't respond. He didn't even flinch. You stared me dead in the eye and said I was safe with you, that you'd never hurt me the way you hurt the others, that you'd keep me safe. But the thing is, her voice broke on the final word. One tear trickled down her cheek. You were already breaking me. Christine breathed shakily in the gallery, resting her hands on her mouth. She'd heard promises like this before. So had Janelle. So had Mary. And they knew. Promises from Kody always came wrapped in love. But they burned when reality came to the surface. The judge allowed Robyn a moment of time to gather herself. The courtroom fell heavy with silence. Once more. No one coughed. No one whispered. Even the air was stiff. Mrs. Brown, the judge whispered. I know this is hard. Take your time. Robyn nodded slowly. But deep inside, she knew she could not turn back. Now, once the truth began coming out, there was no end to it. She held up the creased paper in her trembling hand. They all leaned in to find out what it was. A reporter snapped his camera twice. The sharpness of it rang out like shots fired in the quiet air. Your Honor, Robyn stated, putting emphasis into her voice. This is not a tale of a broken marriage. This is evidence. Evidence that I was holding on for us, fighting to keep this family together. She gazed directly at Kody. He was already building a future with someone else. The gallery exploded in shocked murmurs. Gasps were heard. Someone put their hand over their mouth. Journalists began furiously writing. Christine's eyes grew wide. Janelle's mouth parted in shock. Mary clenched the ring in her fist, so hard it made an imprint on her hand. Kody rocked back in his chair, his face grimacing with anger. He muttered something vicious to his lawyer. But Robyn wouldn't be stopped. She couldn't be stopped. Do you know what it's like? She said, her words getting louder. To give everything to someone, and then discover you were never enough. To find out that while I was grasping, he was already releasing. Her breathing was rapid now. Shallow, but the intensity in her words increased with each phrase. This wasn't weakness anymore. It was pain that had gained voice. Robyn's lawyer moved forward and presented the paper to the judge. The judge read the page, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. She then glanced at Kody. Mr. Brown, the judge said slowly, this is a marriage legal application, submitted in your name. The whole courtroom bristled. Would you care to explain this? Kody's face reddened a little, but he gritted his teeth and smiled. The same well-rehearsed, charming smile that had been seen on television 100 times before. This is being made out of proportion, he told her calmly. It's not what it seems. Robyn made a low, acidic laugh. Then what is it, Kody? Because it appears that the man I trusted was willing to marry another woman while I was still struggling to salvage us. I did not marry a liar. But I got one anyway. Christine gradually shook her head, muttering under her breath. It's happening again. Janelle folded her arms firmly across her chest. Mary gazed at her hands. The judge looked between them, measuring every response, every word. She had witnessed many couples break down under truth. But this wasn't merely a marriage. This was a house of cards imploding before the world. Kody fidgeted with his tie, blowing out loudly through his nose. I was under a lot of pressure, he said in a defensive tone. Everybody blames me for everything. I just wanted something simple. Simple? Robyn echoed, her tone indignant. You refer to secret wedding proposals as simple. Kody remained silent. His silence was stronger than any words he could have spoken. Across the room, Christine's anger was exploding like a volcano. She was no longer able to sit quietly. She had wasted years experiencing the same hurt, the betrayal, the distance, the gradual vanishing of the man she believed she wedded. Her hand flew up, catching everyone off guard. "Your Honor," she spoke, her voice shaking. "I know I'm not involved in this case, but I must say something." The judge paused, then nodded once. Christine rose slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. She looked toward Robyn, and then toward Kody. "You told all of us the same things," Christine said, voice cracking, "that we were special, that we were your forever. But the truth is, you only ever loved yourself. You let us fall apart, while you pursued your own happiness." Robyn dropped her eyes. Christine wasn't going after her. She was stating a truth they'd all lived. Janelle spoke next, her tone steady but with the edge of a knife. "You treated us like we were problems to solve, not humans to love. And then when we finally stopped begging for your love, you moved on." The judge slammed the gavel down, in an attempt to reassert order. "Ladies, please," she replied sternly. "I realize there's emotion here, but this has to be a court proceeding." But it was too late. The room had changed. It was no longer Kody in charge. The women, the ones who'd been left behind, now had the floor. Robyn faced Kody again. Her tears had slowed down now. What took their place was something firmer than sorrow. "Clarity, I gave you everything," she whispered. "I stood up for you when everyone else gave up. I believed you when they didn't. And still, you decided to betray me. Do you know what that does to someone's soul?" Kody then broke his silence, his tone biting. "I didn't betray, I just didn't tell you everything." There were a few gasps from the people in the gallery. That one sentence told them all they needed to know. "You didn't say anything because you knew," Robyn retorted. "You knew I would never buy it. You knew I'd be devastated. So you lied to me. You lied to me every day and stared at me with those wonderful blue eyes of yours. And lied." Kody's jaw clenched. His attorney placed a hand on his arm, attempting to soothe him, but his facade was beginning to crumble. You could see the rage simmering just below the surface. "I was protecting us," he grunted. "No," Robyn told him flatly. "You were defending yourself." She spoke loud enough for the whole courtroom to hear. For one instant, not even the judge spoke. She just sat there, her face relaxing, not as a juror but as a woman who had witnessed too many families get consumed like this before. Christine released a trembling breath. "Do you know what hurts the most?" she asked quietly, as much to herself as anything. "He made us all think we were crazy, that we were the issue." Janelle nodded. Mary quietly wiped away her tears. Robyn breathed in deeply. She wasn't that woman who entered this courtroom anymore. Something within her had changed. She glared at Kody, not as a wife, not as the person who loved him, but as a person who was finally standing up for herself. "You betrayed not only the wives," she spoke carefully, her voice firm by now. "You betrayed me. You betrayed the last person who still had faith in you." A loud click echoed. Another reporter taking a photo of this exact moment. The judge cleared her throat softly and leaned forward. "We will recess for a short break before continuing." The gavel struck the desk. Bang! But no one in the room moved right away. They were still frozen in that moment. The moment the truth was no longer buried. Kody gazed down at the floor, his fists wadded on the table. Robyn stood straighter, however tears still remained on her cheeks. Christine, Janelle and Mary shared quiet, heavy glances. They had all experienced the same narrative. But today, the story was lastly being told. And this time, Kody couldn't dictate the storyline. The silence that followed Robyn's final words was like shattered glass suspended in midair. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody was brave enough to make a move. It was the type of moment when the world seems to be holding its breath. Kody's face hardened, his jaw locking so tightly the muscle throbbed. For years he had been the man with the upper hand, the husband, the father, the rule-setter. But he looked trapped at this moment, vulnerable. Robyn dropped her eyes to the paper in her hand, the one that contained it all, the letter, the signature, the proof. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but it was strong enough to shatter him. "Yours," she whispered, her voice shaking but firm enough to be audible. You said you loved me. You told me that I was the last. That our love was real. But the night you said that to me, you were already arranging another wedding. A hidden wedding. Christine made a quiet gasp. Janelle covered her mouth with it. Mary's hands clutched the rim of the bench so hard that her knuckles went white. The judge leaned forward, speaking quietly but with a sharp edge. Mrs. Brown, do you have proof to substantiate this charge? Robyn nodded slowly, and pushed the folded paper across to the bailiff. As he strode over, the echo of his shoes in the courtroom was like a countdown to detonation. The judge unfolded the paper, reading slowly through every word, his eyes narrowing. This is a legally signed engagement document, he said, raising his gaze to Kody, with another woman's name on it. Dated during your marriage to Mrs. Brown. A collective gasp swept through the room like a wave. The reporters at the back scribbled faster. Cameras clicked. Kody's lips parted, but no sound came out. The man who always had something to say had nothing. Robyn finally looked him in the eyes. Not only did you lie to me, she said, sobbing uncontrollably. You lied to us all. You created this empire of love. But behind the scenes it was all a lie. Kody pounded his fist on the table. You don't know everything, he screamed, his voice breaking. You think you know but you don't. The judge slammed down the gavel. Mr. Brown, please control yourself. But Kody didn't sit. He turned to Christine, Janelle and Mary. His chest inflated and deflated like a man on the verge of explosion. You want the truth? Fine. I was finished with all of you long before this. You never listened, never treated me with respect. I needed to find something real again. Someone who actually cared. The courtroom gasped again. Louder this time. Christine rose to her feet, her eyes burning with a combination of anger and grief. Something real, she questioned, shaking. We constructed our lives based on you. We gave you all of everything. And you refer to that as nothing. Kody moved closer to her, his mask finally breaking. You gave me chaos, he snapped. You all did. Every fight, every judgment, every time I felt like a stranger in my own home. I needed out. I needed someone who believed in me again. Robyn's sob broke from her chest like shattered glass. Then why didn't you just leave? She wept. Why promise me forever when forever was already gone? For the first time Kody had no witty defense. No rehearsed excuse. His eyes flashed with something that passed for regret, but was covered up by years of pride. The judge leaned back, drumming his gavel softly. This case has taken a turn none of us expected, he said softly. In the gallery, whispers curled like mist. Christine turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks. Janelle grasped for her hand. Mary sat caught, as though all the years of unspoken anguish had finally overtaken her in one shattering instant. Robyn wiped away her face. But she didn't shatter. She stood tall, delicate but strong. You didn't simply break my trust, she said quietly. You shattered this family's soul. And there, right there, the fellow who had once dominated everything was standing by himself, his empire of lies crumbling before all eyes. The judge cleared his throat. We will have a short recess before resuming with testimonies, he said. The gavel came down. Bang. The reporters ran to the hallway. Cameras flashed like lightning, but within that courtroom things seemed different. For the first time, the truth wasn't being whispered behind closed doors. It was out, loud, unforgiving. Kody Brown's mask had cracked, and the entire world had seen the man behind it. The hallway outside the courtroom was pandemonium. Cameras flashed, reporters yelled questions, and whispers circulated like fire. But in there, as the judge called the court back into session, a tense, chilling silence fell. Kody sat with his fists curled, his breathing ragged. For the first time, he wasn't only under stress, he was trapped. His secrets now had teeth, and they were closing in. Robyn stood again by the witness stand. Her hands continued to shake, but the tears were drying, leaving in their wake something harder. Strength. She was no longer just the shattered woman. She was ready to wrap things up. Judge, now we'll proceed. Mrs. Brown, do you have any additional comments? Robyn's eyes darted toward the spectator section. Christine, Janelle, and Mary were seated again. None of them glanced away. Years of mutual suffering, of unspoken realities, seethed just below the surface. Robyn nodded. Yes, Your Honor, there is something else. The courtroom seemed to chill. Even the air became oppressive. She dipped into her purse and produced a photo. It was creased, folded at the corners, but its strength was unmistakable. She gave it to the bailiff, who took it to the judge. The judge examined it, then tilted his brows upward. Mr. Brown, he said deliberately, care to explain this? Kody stiffened. The photo was handed over to the attorneys, and then to the gallery. Gasps were let out the instant. Christine laid eyes on it. Janelle put her hand over her mouth. Mary breathed softly. No, it was a picture of Kody, with another woman's hand in his, smiling, standing outside a wedding hall. There was a date printed in the corner, a date that fell smack in the middle of his marriage to Robyn. Christine whispering, he really did it. Robyn's tone was husky, but each word stabbed like a knife. This is the woman he intended to marry, while lying to me that we were forever. He told me he was going away for work. He told me I was being paranoid. But meanwhile, he was with her. Kody pounded his hand on the table. It's not what it appears. Judge, then tell me what it is. His lips opened, but no words emerged. The judge looked at Robyn. Do we have a name? Robyn hesitated for an instant, then said firmly, her name is Hannah. The room exploded all over again. Reporters were writing furiously. Christine's body trembled with anger. Janelle appeared about to scream. Mary's eyes brimmed with silent tears. Christine finally rose, unable to keep it inside. You told us that we were the issue. She wept. You guilt-tripped us. You made me feel like I wasn't enough. When you were scheming a new life. Kody flung around to her, pleading. Christine screaming, don't you dare say my name. As if it means something. Janelle stood by her side. Her tone was firm but icy. You broke everything. Not because we let you down, but because you wanted more than the truth could provide. Mary stood up too. The woman who had remained quiet for years. And we allowed you. We allowed you to make us feel insignificant. But not anymore. The gallery fell silent. All three women, Christine, Janelle, and Mary, now stood in unison. For the first time in years, they weren't split. Kody looked back and forth between them, alarm shining behind his pride. You don't understand. Robyn interrupting. No, Kody, you don't understand. This isn't a matter of one slip-up. This is about a pattern. About the fact that you constructed this whole family on promises you never had any intention of fulfilling. The judge cleared his throat. The court will have order. If that's really what this picture and testimony show. Mr. Brown, this is a serious violation of trust and lawful position. Kody slumped into his chair, his face white. The burden of years of deception, manipulation, and lies was finally bearing down. The three former wives sat in a line, side by side, bonded not by love but by deceit. Robyn spun to face them. For the first time there wasn't venom in their gaze. There was comprehension. Robyn whispering, we were all waiting for him to pick us. But he never picked anyone but himself. And for once, Kody Brown was speechless. The judge raised his gavel. The court will continue with final testimony and closing arguments tomorrow morning, he declared. Bang. The courtroom slowly drained out, but the shock still hung in the air. This was no longer a case. This was a public unmasking of a man who had toyed with too many hearts. As the doors closed behind them, the world outside was already raging with headlines. Kody Brown's secret out, the other woman unveiled. But within that courtroom, 4 women were no longer in his shadow. They stood in the light. The courthouse was surrounded the next morning by flashing lights and agitated reporters. News vans set up along the street, like vultures waiting for one last feast. During the night, the story had blown up. All the big outlets were writing about Kody Brown and his secret betrayal. Inside, the courtroom was different. Quieter, heavy. The walls seemed to bear the brunt of every deception, every broken vow, every crushed dream. Kody sat at the defense table, his complexion pale, his fists clutched, his typical assurance.
The man who once controlled everything had disappeared, replaced by a man who now appeared small. Robyn sat across from him, no longer shaking, no longer pleading. She was firm, unflinching. There were tears in her eyes, but they were no longer tears of weakness. They were the kind you weep when you finally release all that you've been holding within. Christine, Janelle, and Mary sat behind her, not as his wives, not as competitors, but as women standing together at last. The judge emerged into the courtroom. Judge, this court is in session. Brown versus Brown. We will move on to the final testimonies and verdict. The gavel struck. Bang. The air was as if holding its breath. Robyn got up from her seat. Her heels tapped softly against the floor, but her steps were firm. Robyn, Your Honor, I stood by this man for years. I believed every word, every promise. I ignored red flags, because I thought love was supposed to hurt sometimes. But now I understand. Love isn't supposed to break you. She looked at Kody. Her voice did not tremble. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed this whole family. You created a world where we were all fighting for bites of your attention. This while you were pouring your heart out to someone else. And then you called it love. Christine stood next, her eyes blazes with quiet anger. Christine, I blamed myself for years. I thought if I just tried harder, I smiled more, was quieter, perhaps you'd love me again. But it was never ever about me. It was about your ego, about power. You didn't want a family. You wanted control. Janelle moved forward as well, her voice crisp but level. Janelle, you left us a long time before you ever walked out the door. And the very worst part, we all knew it was coming, but we were too afraid to say it out loud. Mary last. Her tone was gentle, but it struck hard. Mary, I waited for you to look at me again. To love. But the man I married was gone a long time ago. And today, I say it to you out loud. I deserve better. We all do. The courtroom was still. Even the judge leaned forward, his face mollified by the stark power of their words.
The judge looked at Kody. Judge, Mr. Brown, do you have a final statement? Kody rose slowly as if he were walking in thick water. His voice was harsh. Kody, you all think you know so much. But you don't. I gave my life to this family. I did everything I could to keep it together. And when no one was listening, I found someone who was... I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Robyn's eyes grew cold. Robyn, but it did. And that's your fault. Kody's voice broke, but pride forbade him to weep. He glared around the courtroom and saw the women he once believed he owned, now beyond his reach. For the first time, he was really alone. The judge steepled his fingers. Judge, this court has heard all testimony and evidence. It is obvious that Mr. Brown broke several agreements, legal and personal, and caused extensive emotional damage. The court thus decides in favor of Mrs. Brown. Divorce is ordered effective at once. Custody and settlement of property will follow in separate orders. Bang, the gavel's sound resonated like thunder. Kody bowed his head. All the power, all the control, all the facades he presented, swept away in an instant. Robyn breathed slowly. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't revenge, it was freedom. Christine took her hand. Janelle followed, then Mary. 4 women, once broken by pain, now bound by truth. They didn't need his permission anymore. They didn't need him anymore. Outside, cameras went off, and reporters yelled questions, but it didn't matter. For the first time in years, these women exited that courthouse not as ghosts in his narrative, but as the authors of their own. Robyn glanced back for a moment. Kody was still seated at the table, looking at nothing. Robyn whispering, "You wanted control, but we found our voices." And with that, she walked away.